We're back. Here we are. It is once again time for another Shacknews Game of the Year 2022 deliberation. This time, a category that is near and dear to our hearts. Best RPG, aka role-playing game of the year. Games. Role-playing games are games where you play roles. There you go. If you need a definition of it, it can take broader things. A lot of times, it involves character customization, certain types of strategies, but once again, this is kind of a broad category where with the right elements, any kind of game could become a role-playing game. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, without further ado, why don't we start it off, Donovan? Do you want to start us off?
Sure. I can talk about Pokemon Legends Arceus, which was my pick. Came out in January. Still feels weird that we got such a big Pokemon game in January, then another one late in the calendar year. But Legends Arceus is such a good departure from the Pokemon model, and arguably one of the most immersive games in the franchise. Just the way that it drops you into this, not ancient, but several hundred years in the past Pokemon world, before trainers were a thing, before we even really knew how to catch Pokemon. The Pokeballs are made out of wood. You're writing the Pokedex with pen and paper. It's a very boots on the ground, hands-on kind of Pokemon story that I really enjoyed. Just the way that it kind of reinvented the way that you catch Pokemon in the overworld. You got to sneak through tall grass, straight up boss battles where you're rolling and diving out of the way of 20-foot tall Pokemon trying to chase after you. I like that game quite a lot. It's definitely one of the most significant entries we've gotten from that franchise in a long time. So, Pokemon Legends Arceus.
Nice. Remind me again, Donovan. How much did you play with Psyduck in Arceus?
Not a whole lot. I caught one early on, but I kind of let him go hang out at the farm.
Okay, your nomination is invalid, I'm afraid. If you don't have a team, an all Psyduck team, maxed out level cap, did you really even play the game? Do you know Pokemon? Do you understand?
Psyduck has had its time in this game,
No, always Psyduck. Overruled. Let that be. I want that stricken from the record. I want that blasphemy stricken from the record.
If I take a Psyduck and level it to 99 and defeat Arceus itself with it, is that enough to get your vote?
It would be enough to get my vote. Yeah, maybe. I mean, did you do that, TJ?
No, of course not.
I would at least buy you some candy. Maybe a gold star sticker. I don't know. What do you want, TJ? A pat on the back, an attaboy, whatever you want. Sure. All Psyduck team. All Psyduck, not just one Psyduck. Your whole squad has to be Psyduck. 99.
I was just gonna take the one Psyduck and level it to 99 and then defeat everything else with it.
All right. Well, if you just need one Psyduck to get it done, I respect that. But you can have a whole team of Psyduck. I'll allow it. Then it would get my vote. You would get my vote, TJ. I would vote for you in whatever the category was. But I digress. We have some other nominations here. I feel like we're gonna talk a lot about Elden Ring. So I'm thinking before we pull that Band-Aid off, before we rip it off, I want to tell you about a little game by a small indie company called Gearbox Software, now owned by Embracer. They made a game called Tiny Tina's Wonderland. Now, I'm a big fan of looter shooters, especially the Borderlands series. I will show my bias. It is tattooed right here on my arm. Maybe it won't show up, but there's a little Vault Hunter symbol and a claptrap there on my inner forearm. But I'm also a big Dungeons and Dragons fan. And so this was like putting chocolate and peanut butter together for me here. I loved this game so much. It's one of the few games that I played all the way through and kept playing afterwards this year just for personal enjoyment. I love the way it combined all of the crazy over the top weaponry of the series with some very, very more RPG aspects, such as leveling up your character, uh, getting the ability to do dual classes and swap that around. They've added companions to a lot of the classes as well. So I thought that was also like having familiars in D&D is a very common thing, or things like that. And then a phenomenal voice cast, a fantastic setting. The characters and creatures that you meet are all very, very fantasy, and I couldn't get enough of it. And it's really good. If you're a fan of role playing games, a lot of the humor is going to appeal to you. They even added like a board game world. On top, like Borderlands games traditionally, you just kind of take the first person stroll through each territory, but this time around you would interact with like a overhead world map in a reminded me of like old Final Fantasy games. I know I go back to that one a lot, but it's one of my favorites, where you're walking around the world. You can have random enemy encounters as you walk around, and unlock different like treasures and bonuses and things like that. Adding the traps too. Traps are like a big thing in Dungeons and Dragons. So a lot of the like little foot switch traps that would breathe fire, shoot arrows at you, or hit you with a club, that swinging battle axes, things like that were also a really nice touch. And yeah, I'm probably going to go back to it at some point too, just to try out some of the different class combinations.
World map was very, very, very cool. Like that was one of the more interesting takes on navigation in a game world, in the sense of like, a lot of times in certain games you can kind of just like launch what you want to launch, but like having that ability to kind of like tie it together so it's fluid and it's connected. Like if you want to launch a mission, like you are walking to that location to launch that mission, like on the board, instead of like, fast traveling in a game to a signpost and then launching it from there. Like it was very neat. I thought that the
layout was
cool. Amazing.
It added to the RPG elements of the game in a really cool way. And I really think like you don't see a lot of I feel like a lot of first person shooter games don't fall into the RPG category and can't be classified as such. Fallout is the only other one that comes to mind. Skyrim, but that's more of a fantasy setting than a first person shooter in my mind. But they did a fantastic job with it here, and it took like two of my favorite things, like I said, put them together in such a great package, and I want more of it. I'm ready for more of it already.
It was also, I think that's something that maybe folks who are really into D&D don't realize this because they're already into D&D. I'm not. Like, I've had the opportunity to join a D&D game for like 3 years. I'm like, nah, not for me. Don't care. This was the first time that I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. And if this is like that foot in the door, like, representation, like it did a really good job of like presenting D&D to somebody who doesn't really care about it at all, in a sense that I'm like, I could see myself being, interested in a D&D campaign because the game represented D&D in a way that I found appealing. But if you're already into D&D, you're just like, this is cool. It's like D&D, but I feel like it's a gateway game to D&D.
Yeah. Because I also think one thing to note is the humor, the Borderlands style of humor is very nerdy and kitschy and pop culture and lines up very well with the kind of like quirky, like nerdy stuff that happens in a D&D game,
Not to mention the
nothing's
spells
ever
too,
played
Blake.
straight. What?
The spells are really fun in that game. Like your grenades that are spells, they're so different and so.
How did you even get this spell?
Yeah, it's really cool.
That was one of my favorite lines. My friends that play D&D that I played it with were just constantly like, oh yeah, that's totally like something that you would see in a D&D game or something that you would hear, or like they were able to relate their experience back to D&D like at every turn.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Absolutely. It was nice. It's a nice little campaign, and it's nice because like not all my friends play D&D, but you know if they're not playing D&D, they'll play video games, and we're always looking for stuff to play together. So a 4-player first-person shooter that's easy for people to just kind of pick up and wrap their heads around and have fun with, and you don't even really have to concern yourself too much with like the role-playing game aspect if you don't want to necessarily. Still have that same enjoyable experience of hanging out with your friends playing the
That's
game.
very notable. I want to make way for people to make other nominations in a second, but that's very notable because I wanted to play the game based on the art style and the Borderlands formula. But I sold my friends on playing the game because it was basically a take on D&D. So it was able to bring people that were looking for two different things together. And I thought that was actually kind of cool. Like it's not just a shooter and it's not just like a D&D game. Like it's a very good mix that kind of blends those things together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is the one category. I know there's a lot of good stuff that's going in here, but I really feel like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was something noteworthy and kind of a new genre to me. And yeah, I'm ready to go to bat for it. All right. Well, Sam, we've cleared the runway. Dorothea, if you or anyone really, Donovan, Bill, anyone want to talk about Elden Ring at all on staff ever?
I would like to say Elden Ring, and I close my case.
Very-
David, if you
very,
May I retort with
yeah.
Elden Ring, Schmelden Ring. That's all I've got.
From
Tina laid an egg. How about that?
I was gonna say from like the only thing I have to say about Elden Ring is from a RPG standpoint, like role playing the kind of character. I definitely did that. I know Sam and David have talked to me extensively about it, and I've said it in other videos throughout the year. But I essentially turned my entire gameplay loop into. I think it was classified as a great hammer, but it was like a hammer with a ball, like a mace or whatever, with spikes on it. I would two-hand that weapon and run up to everything I ever saw in the game, jump in the air, and smash it on the head. And if it didn't die, I would move away, time it, space it, jump in the air, and smash it on the head. And that was the way I beat Elden Ring. Like, I was able to be like, this is what I want to do, and build into that entirely to be able to pull off playing that only the way that I wanted to.
Yeah.
yeah.
And look, no shade on Pokemon or Tiny Tina's excellent games. I feel that Elden Ring allows players to have more options when it comes to playing a role. In Elden Ring, and this is, can you do that? Can you, like, correct me if I'm wrong, can you do this in Pokemon? Can you do this in Tiny Tina's? Can you role play as an NPC and be invaded by another player and trick them into thinking that you are an NPC? That you are playing the role of an NPC on a little path, walking back and forth, and then turn the tide and attack them.
Well, see, here's the thing. People aren't dicks in Pokemon Arceus or in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands.
Sam,
I mean,
look, the fact that you think I don't think that's a dick move. I think that's fine.
Sam,
You enter the
Australian
enter
morals
the
are
game
different.
knowing that
We know that.
invasion is on the table. So you enter the ring knowing you're going to get hit. You can't.
Role
That's not a
playing is
dick
a
move.
dick up to the territory.
Sam, everything you just described, you could do that in Watch Dogs, and that game didn't win any damn awards. All right.
Oh,
So,
not
take
not
that.
bitter at
That game
all.
came out. That game came out 2 years ago, I think. I don't remember.
Donovan, I
Objection
appreciate your
sustained,
energy right
Donovan.
now.
Objection sustained.
No, let that fly. That was beautiful.
I'm going to invade this conversation. I echo everything Sam said. What I love most about these games is that it's almost like classic Mortal Kombat in a way, in that people can kind of take a liking to it for different reasons. You might be into the characters, the lore, the gameplay. For me, I'm a really systems-driven player. If a game has deep systems, I'm going to get into it. And Sam might throw out an objection of his own in a second here, but there have been a lot of players on Soul's Twitter who have said that Elden Ring feels like the spiritual successor to Dark Souls 2 specifically. And I would agree, because Dark Souls 2 had a lot of very experimental systems. It had just an ocean's depth worth of gameplay builds through armor, through rings, through items, deeper than any game I would say before or after it until Elden Ring. And I have been constantly amazed by the character builds I have seen others play, as well as the one I played myself. I went into one boss fight called the Fire Giant. I was struggling with this one, so I finally decided to summon. And I summoned someone who their first move is to impale themselves with a sword and take themselves down to like one HP. And I'm like, I hope you know what the fuck you're doing, because I'm trying to beat this boss. We go in there, and this sorceress calls down like meteors, storms, and the giant's life bar just went. And I was like, oh, I never doubted you for a second. I was totally behind you because I was literally behind them because I didn't even get a chance to do anything. And it was just one of the coolest builds I'd ever seen, and immediately made me want to say, I want to do that. I think one of the great pleasures that Souls players take in these games is, in every game since Demon Souls, you've been able to see apparitions of other players. And when that happens, I always take a look at like what armor are they wearing, what weapons are they carrying, what helm do they have equipped, because I'm constantly looking for new build ideas. One of my favorite things to do is to do the dash only builds. I've beaten every Souls game using only a bow. I beat Dark Souls 2 using only a kitchen ladle. I love the challenge runs, and Elden Ring has so many of those you can do. I also have to say, kind of adjacent to that, I thought that this is really, I would say it's Dark Souls 4 subtitle Elden Ring, because it does feel like a continuation of the Souls formula, but it improves on it in a lot of ways. And one of the ways it's improved is they really shook up the spell system, which I was glad for. For a long time, the spells, like half the repertoire was soul arrow, bigger soul arrow, biggest soul arrow. And it was just kind of boring to use. But the miracles, the pyromancies, the sorceries, just the breadth of spells you have at your fingertips is a lot of fun, to say nothing of the weapons. I love that in every one of these games, something unique happens with the NPC. In Demon Souls, famously, it was, hey, you're going to play a boss. In fact, someone in the Shacknews chatty, they invaded my game, and we had like a 25-minute brawl in Demon Souls. And I went to the chatty afterwards, and we kind of did the Spider-Man meme point, like, oh man, we played each other, and it's the coolest thing. And in this game, which I'll get more into this in another category, one of the bosses you beat becomes an NPC, and one of the most useful ones. And I just thought that was cool that they're looking to iterate on this formula in small ways. And I think that the video game industry often kind of turns its nose up at iteration. Everyone's chasing innovation, whereas iteration, sanding down rough edges. I think there's something to say for that. And Elden Ring honestly does both. And
does Elden Ring
familiarity is good.
Does Elden Ring scale?
Yeah, absolutely.
David, with like if you have one person in your party, you said it's co-op, so does it scale like to the difficulty if there are more people in your party?
It does, yeah. So like I'm a higher level character than Amy, and whenever she scales, like the game kind of evens out so that she can still have fun. Or if I enter her world, I'm not just Hulk smashing everything. So it's really good about that. And yeah, to say nothing, I've talked extensively, just gushed about the co-op and other categories, but it's still just a delight here. And I love PvP and PvE co-op. So Elden Ring is just a spoil of riches. It's also the most accessible these games have ever been.
Yeah, I gotta say as well, like if you like Pokemon and having your squad of creatures to send forth, you can do that in Elden Ring with the Spirit Ashes. You can have as many as you want. You can have your wolves to send in, you can have your mimic to send in, you can have all of these creatures. And if you like playing with friends in Tiny Tinas, you can do that. You can co-op through this whole thing. And more than that, you can, again, invade other players. And you can really play the role that you want in Elden Ring. And I think that it stands tall among others in this category. Yeah.
So here's what I like about Elden Ring. I like the character customization aspects. I like that it's a player-driven narrative. You kind of choose the story you're going to tell. Here's the things that kind of take away from Elden Ring for me is, one, from my experience personally, it was a grind attempting to do anything in Elden Ring. Like it was it was taking me time. I spent so much time just killing the same soldiers over and over so I could try and do something. And then when I would think I was ready, I wasn't. And that to me shows that there is still a wall, a barrier
I mean,
as far as
conversely, that's
accessibility
not like
is. But also,
if
hold
you
on,
run into a
whoa,
wall.
I want
Oh,
to
come on,
finish.
man.
I want to finish my. I want to finish my whole statement here.
Okay.
All right. The other thing for me is it like not having a direction for me is anxiety inducing. Like not knowing where to go or what to do, like not having any sort of direction. Like the way I tried to get into this game is by asking advice from other players on how to do stuff and how to get into things. But at the same time, like it was still like a lot of different options from a lot of different people telling me a lot of different things. And it sucked because there's also a FOMO aspect to it. You're seeing all your friends having a lot of fun with this game and you want to get into it and you're trying to get into it and you're just fumbling the whole time. And like it's also like the dedication of time that I would have needed in order to really get or catch up, with everybody. It was intimidating. Yeah. So I think that while it is more accessible, yeah, and like I think there's a lot of good qualities about the game, those were hits against it for me personally as far as best RPG goes. Like Tiny Tina's is a very accessible game, and like that's something I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean the Borderlands games are all super accessible because of that Diablo quality, right? Like it's kind of inherited from that. And I know Sam wants to say something, but I'll address your points in reverse. The first thing is I don't remember what they're called in this game because I'm old and set in my ways. I'll just call them bonfires. The checkpoints in dungeons in the overworld where you rest. Blake, if you look from each bonfire, there's kind of a golden trail that goes in a certain direction. That's actually the main path. It's literally telling you where to go. No different than like the quest arrow in like a BioShock game or something.
I got squished by a giant.
You got squished by a giant. So to address your first point, and this is kind of a twofold answer. You can approach almost any scenario in this game by virtue of it being open world in several ways. If you're tired of killing the same soldiers, you could just go somewhere else. If you hit a wall going east, you could just go west, that sort of thing. You could also change up your approach. There are actually stealth mechanics in this game, but not just with stealth, but you can usually, since the areas are bigger, you can go around them, kind of circumvent, the area that's giving you trouble. And I think that is why this is more accessible than any other Souls game. I mentioned in another category that, let's take Dark Souls 1, for example. At the beginning of the game, you can either go, assuming you didn't start with a master key, you can go into a cemetery, or you can go up some steps kind of built into a cliff that leads you to the area where you're quote unquote supposed to go. But if both of those areas are giving you trouble, then you're kind of stuck, right? Because there are only really two paths at that point. And Elden Ring, it's kind of like the scene from Aladdin where the genie's like, your exits are here, everywhere. It really is like that. Like you can just go anywhere you want if you're having trouble, and you can do that via fast travel. You can do that on foot. So I'm not, I'm not disagreeing with your experience, but there are ways for the game to tell you where to go, and you have so many options at your fingertips for other strategies to deploy to get you past the rough spots.
Yeah, and I mean, like, don't get me. I love Elden Ring. I think it's awesome. I think for a lot of the reasons that you guys have said, I had a lot of fun with that game, making my own story as like a sort of thief. I was like collecting rare weapons. That was my storyline. I was going in search of rare magical weapons to create basically I was a relic hunter. And that's how I played my character in interactions with other characters and other NPCs. And that was fun to me. However, I will say that there's almost an illusion of freedom in Elden Ring, in the way that ultimately, as much as you can explore and as much as you can search around and do and try all sorts of different things, You still eventually have to go fight the Elden Lords, and they are Dark Souls back on its bullshit in almost every way. They're cool battles, they are, but don't tell me that you went up against Star Scourge Radon for the first time and you're like, and thought this is accessible when he flies up into the sky and power bombs you from space.
He's not the first boss in the game, so the accessibility, the definition, the scale changes there. And TJ, co-op is always.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it's still gonna be co-op.
Me and a team of 3 rolled up on Radon, and it was a second attempt. So.
Yeah. Like my fire giant story, I went from like pounding my head against that boss to, you know what, I'm going to summon someone, and they just squashed the fire giant.
And sorry.
I was just gonna. I just want to flex here. Am I the only one that's beaten both Tiny Tina's and Elden Ring here?
Might be.
No.
I mean, I don't know. It depends. Do you consider beating Elden Ring just walking away and like living your life and feeling happy? Because in that sense, I may have.
I just think that everyone has valid arguments, but when it comes down to it, I think that we're arguing about gameplay. Like, I don't think that Elden Ring being difficult or tough to get into really takes away from it as an RPG necessarily. I just think that it means that some people prefer the ease of access of like a Tiny Tina's, but the RPG elements still exist, even if that one style of gameplay isn't your favorite and the other one is.
Yeah,
because
can I just say that, you know, as somebody who has done no hit runs of previous Souls games and other things that are extremely challenging, this game has added a lot of things that other Souls games didn't have, like a map. Like,
right.
Yeah,
for starters. Well, you know, there's things out there like fast travel from the get-go. I mean, yes, you're going to have to take down the Elden Lords at some point, but there's so much game you can get into without even touching any of that, I feel like, to enjoy yourself.
But the bottom line I wanted to get to before we close this out is that as much freedom as there is and as many options as there were legitimate times where I got to a point in that game where I felt punished for playing the way I did because I wasn't using a certain type of style or a certain type of weapon, or I didn't have something that I should know to beat this thing.
That's the whole series.
And that's the most Dark Souls thing, is coming up against that and just being crushed to smithereens by it without recompense. And for me, the Godskin Apostle was that thing. That boss pisses me off on a level that few other things in that game do. It's a random encounter, and I could have left at any point, but it's also something I didn't feel like I should have to leave just because it's beating me to a pulp. I should be able to utilize all the options I should collected to beat it. And good lord, if it took me like literally from 7 p.m. the night before until 8 a.m. the next morning to finally crack the code. But up until that point, I was so angry with it, to a point where even when I got that victory, I was angry about it. And that is something I won't experience in Pokemon Legends Arceus.
I do like that TJ's whole thing was like, I shouldn't have to leave. Why doesn't he leave?
There is no spoon and there is no code, TJ.
I appreciate the variety. Like, I feel like, you know, you might go up against a boss that you completely smash, and then next time around, your same build or layout's not going to work.
I mean, I beat the entire run of everything I ever encountered by jumping in the air and hitting it with a big stick. So, like, I feel like that's pretty, like...
You didn't encounter...
I don't know. I don't know that I see that the same way, TJ. I think that... I know Sam played it, and he's talked about this with me his way. Like, he basically picked a weapon early on and decided that's my weapon, and I'm going to use it. And he never had to change strategies, and he never had to change weapons. And I did the same thing where I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this big stick, and that's how I'm going to beat the game. And I never deviated from that, and I was always able to pull it off. I think it's a hard game. And I think there are times when I came up against bosses and I was like, I shouldn't be here yet. And instead of looking at it like, oh, I have to leave and accept defeat, I was like, wait there, fuckhead, I'll be back. you know, and I would go back and not change my style, but like literally maybe
Level
up
up.
my power, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I have to say, TJ, you're not wrong. Like, I go against the grain a little bit here, but the bosses are more often than not one of my least favorite parts of Souls games. But I do feel like there's always a way around them. This to me sounds a lot like, well, not a lot like, but similar to Greg's argument about Marvel Snap in another category, where he was basically saying, I have my strategy. I should have been able to win, but I didn't. So the game is flawed, which I don't agree with. There are so many tools and options around boss fights in Elden Ring, and 9 times out of 10, it's hitting the panic button and going into multiplayer to get other people who can help you. But also, this is part of the strategy of the game. Your playstyle may not be applicable against every boss in the way that you have executed it up until that point. You may need to change things up. I do the same thing that Bill does, not every run, but when I do challenge runs, the idea is I'm either going to use one specific weapon or a class of weapon, and I'm going to beat the game that way. I've beaten these games with only a bow. It can be done,
That's yeah. But you play these games a lot. Like, you are a veteran when it comes to this genre of game.
Can I
think
say
anyone
something?
who plays any type of game a lot is going to be better at it than most.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, you being able to do that comes from like years and years and tons of experience.
Bill beat the game before me. In fact, one of my greatest joys this year has been talking with Bill and Donovan in particular, because this is, I believe, their first Souls game. They might have dipped their toe in the water before, but this is the one they both really got into. And just hearing about that, and Donovan especially even told me at one point, correct me if I'm wrong, Donovan, but he was primarily using a bow. Like, you had other weapons, but you were doing a lot of archery in this game, and it was working out for you.
Yeah, I played about 90% of it with a bow. I had a lot of fun with it. I had never played a Souls game, except I played like maybe a couple of hours of Demon Souls. Was on our must play, I think. But other than that, yeah, I loved Elden Ring. I liked coming at it with a different approach. I lean towards bows and arrows and games like that, and I was able to take down almost all the bosses with it. I never beat the game. I ended up bouncing off. But I enjoyed it a lot. I played through it with a bunch of friends. We were constantly jumping into each other's worlds to help out with bosses, all sorts of stuff. I thought the game was dope.
All right. Well, I think the message here is, some people liked Elden Ring, some people liked it more than others, and some people just wasn't their cup of tea. But there were a lot of excellent RPGs. That is for dang sure. Before we start our votes, does anyone have any last-minute nominations or things they want to state? Otherwise, I'm going to get things going. What do you say?
Let's get the vote.
Let's rock the vote. All right. Well, I'm voting for the clear winner here. Tiny Tina's Wonderland gets my vote. Sam, you're voting for Tiny Tina's Wonderlands as well, right?
Yeah, I mean,
okay, great.
Soft spot in my heart.
Cool. All right, there we go. Gavels, bang. Sorry, you said it. It's too late. All right, Bill. No, go ahead, Sam.
Elden Ring.
Elden Ring. All right. Shocking. I know. Bill Lavoie.
I love both of those games quite a lot. But if I think about role playing, I'm gonna stick with Tiny Tina's. I think that did more to sort of introduce me to role playing, D&D, and yeah, I don't know.
It's like kind of true. It's like the aspects that are the D&D aspects of Elden Ring are very hardcore D&D, I feel. And Wonderlands is more like, hey, let's throw some pies around and we'll be barbarians.
I love them both, but in this category, I'm going with Tina.
For sure. I feel that. And
tiny version of Tina, though.
The tiny version. Morgan Shaver.
I'm going to vote for Elden Ring.
Okay. All right. Ozzy Mejia.
Well, I originally had Pokemon down, but I think by the definition of this category, Sam has swayed me over to Elden Ring.
Oh, I didn't sway you over to Tiny Tina's. I didn't work hard enough. TJ?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Pokemon Legends Arceus. I love Elden Ring a lot for reasons I'm gonna vote for in other categories, but I really do think that Arceus is a excellent new chapter for that entire franchise. The overworld, having the Pokemon there and making it feel more alive and making you feel more immersed, and still being able to like convey your personality through the Pokemon that you catch and use for your team. I love all those things, and I love not being told that I have to go anywhere in that game. I can just go wherever I feel like.
All right. Greg, Burkleton Burke.
I feel like Borderlands had become stale. I had to slog through 3, and I was not like it felt like a chore. And then when Tiny Tina's came out, that game, for some reason, it might have been the aesthetic, it might have been the redesigns, it might have been the environments, open world, whatever. Like, it really did spring breath of life into that franchise that was getting stale. And I really did like it for that reason. And just like everything about that game is great. The art style, the combat, the humor, the take on Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm gonna do Tiny Tina's.
All right. Donovan.
I am going to vote for Elden Ring. I love Pokemon to death, but I still look back at Elden Ring as probably the more memorable RPG experience of the early 2022 release window for myself.
All right, Denny.
Oh, Elden Ring.
Love it.
David. All right, David. Wouldn't it be crazy? Wouldn't it just like rock everybody's like minds if you voted for Tiny Tina's right now?
Your Honor, when I entered your courtroom, I swore an oath to tell the truth and nothing but. Elden Ring is the best RPG of 2022. Put me down for Elden Ring.
Respectfully disagree.
Oh man. Well, we have a few more votes to count before we get going here. Asif knows what's up, and that's why he voted for Tiny Tina's Wonderland. Yeah. We played a lot of that game together. Played through most of it.
Yeah, he was really into that
was a
one.
good time. Yeah. So let's see, and then I think we just need Steve's. Steve's vote goes to Pokemon Legends. Arceus. And I believe that's everybody. And I don't know. I think we should roll a D20.
Do we have a tie?
No, we don't.
That's
unfortunately.
Really unfortunate.
Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was not able to beat out the
Hey Blake,
the mass
you
hysteria.
Now, go forth.